The Joy of Motherhood by Buchi Emecheta. Chapter 4. First Shocks of Motherhood. The journey from Mebuza to Lagos took Nuigo and the elder Roland brother 4 days, traveling in overloaded mammy lorries that carried various kinds of foodstuffs as well as passengers. People, live hens, dried fish and all were packed into the same choking compartment. Like herself, the senior Roland was a bad traveller, and, worse still, did not seem to know where they were going. He knew only that they were on their way to Lagos, but whether it was to the west or east of Mebuza he could not tell. When they came to Benin, and had to get off the lorry, poor brother-in-law thought they had arrived. A group of laughing traders teased him. "Yes, this is Lagos. If you turn that corner you'll be there." But he was soon put right, for they were in fact just transferring to another lorry. The incident was almost repeated at Oshogbo, though the brother-in-law could not be blamed for hoping their journey was over. They were by now extremely tired and travel-sore, and had been so long on the road that Nuigo herself imagined they must be near the end of the earth. They changed to the last lorry, and when they did eventually arrive at Ido in Lagos, brother-in-law would not trust what anyone said. He had to be assured by the driver as well as the other passengers before he believed they had finally reached their destination. He came out of the lorry with the slowness of an old man, the muscles of his arms beginning to knot in anticipation of being made fun of again. But this time he had been told the truth. He pulled Nuigo along, and they showed the address they wanted to a food seller at the lorry station who directed them correctly to Yaba. So it was that Nuigo arrived in Lagos, and was led by her new brother-in-law to a queer-looking house. They had to wait on the veranda, while a woman neighbor identifying herself as Cordelia, the cook's wife, went to tell the prospective husband Nafe, who was attending to the washing of his white master and mistress, that his people were there, and that it looked as if he had been brought a wife. "A wife," he said, pretending to be surprised at the mere idea. "Are you sure? She looks like a wife. She has things wrapped up, like somebody who is not just here for a visit but to stay." Nafe was so pleased at the idea that he hurried with his ironing, almost burning himself with the coal-pressing iron. He whispered the news to the cook and the steward. Since they were all Ibos, though Nafe was the only one from western Ibo land, they knew that there was going to be a to-do that evening. They were excited to hear of the arrival of a new person. So far was it from Lagos to their homeland it took several days to make the journey, and only very few enterprising people attempted it at the time. That anyone who spoke any dialect remotely connected with Lobo was regarded as a brother or sister. They also knew that palm wine would flow aplenty till the small hours of the morning. So they all hurried with their work, some singing, others whistling. It was indeed a piece of good news. The white master, Dr. Mears, worked at the forensic science laboratory in Yaba. He and his wife both wondered what the excitement was about, but could not bring themselves to ask. Soon afterwards, Nafe went up to the madam and said, "I go, madam." "Yes," she replied in the cultured, distant voice which she invariably used when addressing the native servants. "Yes, Nafe. Two shall not need you till the morning. Good night." "Good night, madam." "Good night, sir," Nafe said to the master, who was pretending to be too engrossed in the paper he held in front of him to be aware of what was going on about him. Dr. Mears peered over the paper, smiled mischievously and answered, "Good night, Baboon." Mrs. Mears straightway went into a torrent of words, too fast and too emotionally charged for Nafe, who stood there like a statue, to understand. He gaped from husband to wife and back again, wondering why she should be so angry. The woman went on for a while, then suddenly realized that Nafe was still standing by the door. She motioned with her arm for him to go away. He heard Dr. Mears laugh and repeat the word baboon. Women were all the same, Nafe thought as he made his way to his own part of the compound, determined to ask someone in the near future what the word baboon meant. Not that he was the type of man who would have done anything had he known its meaning. He would simply shrug his shoulders and say, "We work for them, and they pay us. His calling me a baboon does not make me one." If the master was intelligent, as it was said all white men were, then why did he not show a little of it, and tell his wife to keep quiet? What kind of an intelligent man could not keep his wife quiet, instead of laughing stupidly over a newspaper? Nafe did not realize that Dr. Mears' laughter was inspired by that type of wickedness that reduces any man, white or black, intelligent or not, to a new low, lower than the basest of animals. For animals, at least, respected each other's feelings, each other's dignity. By this time Nuigo and her escort were very tired. The cook's wife, the woman who had gone to inform Nafe of their arrival, welcomed them with pounded yam and a karzi soup. They were not used to this type of soup, but the novelty of it, and the fact that they were so hungry and tired took its strangeness away. Nuigo was grateful for it, and was just falling asleep with a full stomach, when in walked a man with a belly like a pregnant cow, wobbling first to the side, and then to that. The belly, coupled with the fact that he was short, made him look like a barrel. His hair, unlike that of men at home and abusers, was not closely shaved. He left a lot of it on his head, like that of a woman mourning for her husband. His skin was pale, the skin of someone who had for a long time worked in the shade, and not in the open air. His cheeks were puffy, and looked as if he had pieces of hot yam inside them, and they seemed to have pushed his mouth into a smaller size above his weak jaw. And his clothes, Nuigo had never seen men dressed like that. Khaki shorts with holes and an old, loose, white singlet. If her husband-to-be was like this, she thought, she would go back to her father. Why, marrying such a jelly of a man would be like living with a middle-aged woman. She saw out of the corner of her eye the two men embracing, clearly glad to see each other. She heard the senior Olam referring to the other as Nafe, and, looking up, she saw that this newcomer indeed had a tribal mark identical with that of his brother. It could not be. This could not be the man she was to live with. How could two brothers be so unlike? They had similar foreheads, and the same kind of gestures, but there the similarities ended, for otherwise the two men were as different as water and oil. She felt like bursting into tears, like begging the senior Olam to please take her home, but she knew that even though her father was the best of fathers, there was such a thing as overstaying one's welcome. This man was welcoming them. He was taking in her wooden box, and her other things which had been wrapped in a homemade net for her with so much care by her father's wives. At first Nafe had greeted her only shyly with a single word. "You're welcome." The senior Olam glanced at her for a second, concerned at her obvious disappointment, but his increasingly enthusiastic brother did not give him a chance to worry for long. He more or less steered him away from Nuigo, who followed them inside, and sat huddled in a chair, as if she was suffering from cold. Nafe could tell that Nuigo did not approve of him, but he could not help the way he was made, and what anyway was she going to do about it? In his 5 years in Lagos he had seen worse situations. He had seen a wife brought for an abuser man in Lagos running away at the sight of her future husband, so that friends had to help the poor bridegroom catch the runaway bride. At least Nuigo did not do that. Very few women approved of their husbands on the first day. It was a big joke to the men, women from home wanting to come to Lagos, where they would not have to work too hard, and expecting a handsome, strong figure of a husband into the bargain. Women were so stupid. The cooks and stewards and many of the abuser people living in that area came to congratulate Nafe and to remark that they had sent him a mami wata, as very beautiful women were called. Nuigo held herself tight, trying bravely to accept the greetings, and not to imagine what her father would say had this man come in person to ask for his daughter. She fought back tears of frustration. She was used to tall, wiry farmers, with rough, blackened hands from farming, long, lean legs and very dark skin. This one was short. The flesh of his upper arm danced as he moved about jubilantly among his friends, and that protruding belly. Why did he not cover it? She despised him on that first night, especially when much later people began to take their exaggerated leave. He demanded his marital right, as if determined not to give her a chance to change her mind. She had thought she would be allowed to rest at least on the first night after her arrival before being pounced upon by this angry man, her new husband. After such an experience, Nueg knew why horrible-looking men raped women, because they are aware of their inadequacy. This one worked himself into an animal passion. She was sure he had never seen a woman before. She bore it and relaxed as she had been told, pretending that the person lying on her was Amatokwu, her first sweetheart of a husband. This man's appetite was insatiable, and by morning she was so weary that she cried with relief, and was falling asleep for the first time when she saw him leave the room to go to do his job as the white man's servant. She was so grateful to open her eyes and see him dressing rapidly and talking in a low voice to his brother who was sleeping only a few yards away. She felt humiliated, but what was she to do? She knew she must have cried all night long, and that the older Olam had been there listening, congratulating his brother in his heart. She was used to her long wiry Amatokwu who would glide inside her when she was ready, not this short, fat, stocky man, whose body almost crushed hers. What was more, he did not smell healthy either, unlike men in abuser who had the healthy smell of burning wood and tobacco. This one smelled all soapy, as if he was overwashed. When he had finished dressing he said, "There is enough yam for all of us for some time. I shall tell the women next door to take you to the market, and you can buy meat and make soup. I shall be back for the afternoon meal. I hope you slept well." "Oh, yes, she did," replied Nafe's brother, smugly, wanting her to realize he knew all that had happened in the night. She would have to put up with things. She would rather die in this town called Lagos than go back home and say, "Father, I just do not like the man you have chosen for me." Another thought ran through her mind. Suppose this man made her pregnant, would that not be an untold joy to her people? Zero Maikai, she prayed as she rolled painfully to her other side on the raffia bed. Zero, my dead mother, please make this dream come true, then I will respect this man. I will be his faithful wife and put up with his crude ways and ugly appearance. Oh, please help me, all you my ancestors. If I should become pregnant She nursed her belly, and felt her rather sore legs. If I should ever be pregnant. She smiled wistfully at the whitewashed ceiling, and as she watched a house lizard scuttled from a crack to the slightly open windows, she stared until she fell into a light sleep. In her exhaustion, she dreamed that her Kai was handing her a baby boy by the banks of the Atakpo stream in Abusa. But the slave woman had mocking laughter on her lips. As she tried to wade across the stream, to take the baby from her, the stream seemed to swell, and woman's laughter rang out in the dense forest. Nuigo stretched out her arms several times, and would almost have touched the baby, had not the stream suddenly become deeper, and the woman risen to a higher level. "Please," Nuigo cried. "Please let me have him, please." At first her voice was pleading, but after she had been tantalized like this many times, she screamed at the woman, "Have you not tortured me enough? I did not kill you. Oh, give me my child, give me my child." She was being shaken by someone. It was Nafe's brother. "New wife, what is all this shouting for? You are having a bad dream. Wake up, wake up, it is only a dream." She opened her eyes, startled. "Do you think I shall be tempted to take other people's babies in this town? I dreamed that I was doing so." "No, you will not. You are tired and over-anxious, that's all. Don't go to that market today. We shall use the fish and the yams we brought. But your brother's friends will come to eat the food cooked by a new wife. Suppose they realize that it's only fishy soup and no meat. I will tell them that I like only fishy soup." He smiled sympathetically. "You are very tired, and my brother was very greedy. You must forgive him." You see, he did not believe his luck. He wanted to make sure you wouldn't run away. You know you are beautiful, and the daughter of a famous man. Learn to respect him. It may be difficult, but you will see your hopes fulfilled. I shall come and visit you again, when you are really back. Mad. Brother-in-law, did you say mad? He walked away to his side of the room with slow deliberation. She did not notice his shoulders twisting slightly in amusement. This type of man, thought Nuigo as she watched him, did not belong to a soft place like this. He belonged to the clear sun, the bright moon, to his farm and his rest hut, where he could sense an esling cobra, a scuttling scorpion, hear a howling hyena. Not here. Not in this place. This square room painted completely white like a place of sacrifice. This place where men's flesh hung loose on their bones, where men had bellies like pregnant women, where men covered their bodies all day long. Yes, he would go back to where his people had lived for 5, 6, 7 generations without any change at all. How did his younger brother called Nafe come to find this place in the first instance? And if she should go mad in a town like this, where would she find a medicine man? If you think I shall go mad, brother-in-law, I'd like to go back with you. But please drop me at Chagwashi, where my grandparents came from. I don't want to be a disgrace to my father anymore." Nafe's brother now laughed out loud, throwing back his shaven head, and explained to her in a kind voice, "New wife, I don't mean that kind of madness. I mean the kind that goes like this." He crossed his arms, couched his shoulders as one would when holding a small baby, and rocked his arms. "Kutu, kutu, ha, 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 kutu, kutu, kutu." Then Nuigo laughed too. She returned to the raffia mat bed, and did not dream any more, understanding what he was saying. That women talk and behave like mad people with their infants who are too young to make sense of any such noises. Before her brother-in-law left a few weeks later, he prayed that she would not be a failure. New Ego thanked him, and through him, she sent 20,000 messages to her father, to say how happy she was, how handsome her husband was. She kept repeating this over and over again, like a child frightened of being left alone. The senior Roland did his best to assure her that her father would never forget her in his prayers. He told her that things were beginning to look all right already, though she did not at the time know what he meant. She soon realized that her brother-in-law had guessed correctly. The changes that came about in her were so gradual that at first she did not attribute them to anything like pregnancy. As her suspicions intensified, she was too confused even to tell her husband. Perhaps she was only imagining things, having delusions. She found that she was feeling slightly ill and dizzy, but she would hide it, and when Nafe had gone to work she would close the door, take out their small mirror and examine herself. Had she changed all that much? Her breasts, how big were they before? Was that tingling itch she felt in them not there before? Had her belly really become bigger? She could not tell for sure. The more positive she became, the more afraid she was. Her husband Nafe would get up at 6 in the morning by the clock the master and his wife had given him. He would then pull on his khaki shorts, eat the night's leftover food, and dash to Dr. Mears' part of the compound to start doing their washing. He used 2 giant in bathtubs, grey and big enough to take up to 3 people at the same time. He would sit on a kitchen stool by the first bathe and wash all manner of articles, towels, women's nightdresses and what have you. Then, in mid-morning, he would move to the second bathtub and start the rinsing. Intermittently, he had to fetch water from the garden pump, carrying a tin bucket in each hand. After the day's washing had been hung out to dry, he would go into the pantry and fill the pressing iron with coal. So regularly timed was his daily progression that one could tell the hour of the day by what he was doing. They gave him the grand-eyed Nafe, the washerman. So good was he at his job that, for a small consideration, the master's friends often borrowed him. He only had half a day off in the week, and that was on Sundays, when he worked till 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So he had little time to take notice of New Ego, and she did not look or ask for any attention from him. She had come to accept him as one of the inevitabilities of fate. She had at first rejected his way of earning a living, and had asked him why he could not find a more respectable job. Nafe had scoffed and told her that in a town people never minded what they did to get money, as long as it was honest. Did she not think the work easier and much more predictable than farming? But every time she saw her husband hanging out the white woman's smalls, New Ego would wince as someone in pain. The feeling would cut deeper when, with sickening heart, she heard Nafe talking effusively about his treatment of dainty clothes and silk. The man was actually proud of his work, she realized. On Sunday afternoons, when he was free, they would walk from Yaba to Buchi Emecheta, and then to Lagos Island, where the Igbo community held their own Christian services. New Ego did not understand what Christianity was all about, but, like any bride brought from home, she simply followed in her husband's footsteps. They would return on a bus, which for her was a great treat, that coming home in style. On the first Sunday of every month, Nafe would take her to the Buchi family meeting, also on Lagos Island. Most of their people lived in the older part of the town near their places of work at the dockyard. The few in domestic service lived a little outside the town, in the quieter and newer parts, with the white masters. She learned early in their married life 2 economies, since Nafe earned little. After going to the market on Saturdays, she would buy soda soap, wash all their clothes, and, with a towel tied round her waist, hang them out in the sun. She would then lock herself indoors, and, however much the other wives in the compound called her, she would not emerge until their clothes were dry. Then she would fold and press them with her Odo handle, and put them under their pillows to make them smoother, ready for the next day. One Sunday she toyed with the idea of telling Nafe that she would like to stay at home, just for a change. After all, not only did church mean little to her, it was becoming monotonous attending week after week. She left Nafe's food on their one table, placed the hand-washing bowl with water in it conveniently near for him, and, contrary to her nature and to custom, sat and watched him eat. After a few mouthfuls, Nafe looked up. "You stare at me, as if you don't want me to eat the food you cooked. You know a wife is not allowed to do that. That applies in abuses, not here," Nuigo said. "Well, whether we're an abuser or not, I am still your husband and still a man. You should not sit there staring at me." "A man? Some man? What did you say? Did I not pay your bride price? Am I not your owner? You know, the airs you put on are getting rather boring. I know you are the daughter of Agbadi. But he didn't marry you himself, and keep you by his side forever. If you are going to be my wife, you must accept my work, my way of life. I will not have it any other way. You must understand that. So go out and gossip with Cordelia, and let me finish my food in peace." Nuigo stood up angrily and declared, "If you had dared come to my father's compound to ask for me, my brothers would have thrown you out. My people only let me come to you here, because they thought you were like your brother, not like this. If things had worked out the way they should have done, I wouldn't have left the house of Amatokwu to come and live with a man who washes women's underwear. A man indeed." Nafe was hurt, but despite it, he looked at Nuigo as if he had never seen her before. Why, the woman was changing. She had been beautiful when she came here, but surely not this beautiful, that high forehead carrying the tribal marks of a chief's daughter, the still thin body which somehow seemed to emphasize the flabbiness of his own, that looping neck. Why was she holding her neck so stiffly? It must be the hairstyle she was wearing, too tightly plaited. And those breasts, didn't they look rather large? Nafe tried to remember how they had looked when his wife first arrived, but could not. All he knew was that they were now bigger. Yes, something was happening to her. Anyway, he was not going to allow Nuigo to keep comparing her life with him with her life with her former husband. Pity your ideal Lamatok will almost beat you to death, because you did not bear him a son. Look at yourself, you look pregnant to me, and you were not like that when you came here. What else does a woman want? I've given you a home and, if all goes well, the child you and your father have been wanting, and you still there staring at me with hatred in your eyes. The day you mention Amatokwu's name in this house again, I shall give you the greatest beating you'll ever had. You spoiled, selfish woman. You who put Amatokwu's manhood in question, so that he had to marry again quickly, and have many children in quick succession. Now you come here, where I did not particularly press you to be pregnant in the first month, and you talk this foolishness. You are not only ugly, but you are a shatterer of dreams. I imagined that when I told my husband of my coming child I should tell it nicely. Yes, maybe by the moonlight, or on your goatskin by the fireside. I will not listen to your nonsense, Nuigo cried, feeling very sorry for herself. that it should all come to this. Well, if you are pregnant, and believe me, I hope to God you are, there is still one problem. What will they say in the church? We have not been married there. If I do not marry you in church, they will remove all names from the church register, and Madam here will not like it. I may even lose my job. So keep quiet, will you? Yabani the cook had to marry his wife in the Catholic Church to save his job. All the time he was saying this, a sick sensation was turning round and round inside Nuigo's head. That she had to keep such a joyous thing as this quiet, because of a shriveled old woman with a looking skin like the flesh of a pig. If Nafe had said it was because of Dr. Mears, Nuigo might have swallowed it, but not for that thing of a female whom she would not dream of offering to an enemy god. Oh, her dear mother, was this a man she was living with? How could a situation rob a man of his manhood without him knowing it? She whirled round like a hurricane to face him, and let go her tongue. You behave like a slave. Do you go to her and say, "Please, Madam Crawskin, can I sleep with my wife today?" Do you make sure the stinking underpants she wears are well washed and pressed before you come and touch me? Me, Nuigo, the daughter of Agbadi of Ibuza. Oh, shame on you. I will never marry you in church. If she sacks you because of that, I shall go home to my father. I want to live with a man, not a woman-made man. Nafe laughed cynically and remarked, I wonder what good father would take his pregnant daughter back into his home, just because his son-in-law's job doesn't suit her. Your father is well known for his traditional principles. I'd like to see his face when you tell him you don't like the second husband he has chosen for you, especially since your Kai has consented to the marriage by making you pregnant. If you were not pregnant, it might be more understandable, but not now that the gods have legalized our marriage. Nuigo, the daughter of Agbadi. As I said earlier, you have to do what I say. Your father cannot help you now. You are not even happy to see me pregnant, the greatest joy of my life. Of course I am happy to know that I am a man. Yes, that I can make a woman pregnant. But any man can do that. What do you want me to do? How many babies are born in this town every day? You're just looking for an excuse to pick a quarrel. Go and pick one with your friend Cordelia. Leave me alone. Remember, though, without me you could not be carrying that. Amid the heat of her emotion, a calmer voice said to her, yes, without what he has, you could never become a mother. She started to cry then. Bitter, angry and frustrated sobs that set her whole body a-shake. Nafe stood there, his hands hanging by his sides. He did not know what to think, how to react. He could only say, if I lose my job, who will feed you and the child? And the other children you are going to have for me? Her lot was not worse than those of her Ibo neighbors, the cook's wife and the wife of the steward. Even those girls from Medusa who now lived on the island with their husbands, told her many a time that she was lucky not to be married to a man working in the docks. The dock workers would go away for weeks and weeks, leaving their young wives to have babies on their own, with no help except that given by neighbors. They had told her the story of a girl called Ngboyo whose husband was working at a dock in Port Harcourt. She had her first baby in the night, and she never stopped bleeding until she died. She and her child had been buried 10 days before her husband Okibuna returned. It took the man a long time to recover from the shock. When Nuigo later confided in Cordelia, the wife of Yabani, she had laughed at her moaning about her husband, and had said to her, "You want a husband who has time to ask you if you wish to eat rice, or drink corn pap with honey. Forget it. Men here are too busy being white men's servants to be men. We women mind the home, not our husbands. Their manhood has been taken away from them. The shame of it is that they don't know it. All they see is the money, shining white man's money. But, Nuigo had protested, my father released his slaves, because the white man says it is illegal. Yet these our husbands are like slaves, don't you think? They are all slaves, including us. If their masters treat them badly, they take it out on us. The only difference is that they are given some pay for their work, instead of having been bought. But the pay is just enough for us to rent an old room like this. Will it never end? Nuigo asked. I don't know, my friend. I don't know if it will. It has been going on for ages. I don't think it will ever end, Cordelia finalized, shaking her head. The monthly meetings on the island with her fellow abuser wives did Nuigo a great deal of good. The other women taught her how to start her own business, so that she would not have only one outfit to wear. They let her borrow 5 shillings from the Women's Fund, and advised her to buy tins of cigarettes and packets of matches. A tin of cigarettes cost 2 shillings, and she then sold the cigarettes singly for a penny each. As there were 36 in each tin, she made a profit of 1 shilling on a tin. The same thing applied to boxes of matches. She would buy a carton of 12 boxes for 1 shilling and 6pence, and then sell each box for 2 pence, making a profit of 6 pence on each carton. She was so thrilled with this that, as the other more experienced women had foretold, she had no time to be lonely, or worry about her husband's humiliating job, or bite her fingers about her coming child. Yes, she was pregnant. She also now had some money of her own, and she started paying back her loan to the Women's Fund. Some of the women sold lappers, and Nuigo was able to buy 1 outfit for herself, paying 2 shillings every month. By the time she had been in Lagos for 6 months, she had bought herself another complete outfit with a head tie to match, and had paid off her 5 shillings loan. Like other husbands and wives in Lagos, Nuigo and Nafe started growing slightly apart. Not that they were that close at the start. Now each was in a different world. There was no time for petting or talking to each other about love. That type of family awareness which the illiterate farmer was able to show his wives, his household, his compound, had been lost in Lagos, for the job of the white man, for the joy of buying expensive lappers, and for the feel of shiny trinkets. Few men in Lagos would have time to sit and admire their wives' tattoos, let alone tell them tales of animals nestling in the forests, like the village husband who might lure a favorite wife into the farm, to make love to her with only the sky as their shelter, or bath in the same stream with her, scrubbing one another's backs. In Lagos a wife would not have time. She had to work. She provided the food from her husband's meager housekeeping money, but finding the money for clothes, for any kind of comforts, in some cases for the children's school fees, was on her shoulders. Nuigo soon slipped into this pattern of living, so much so that on the night she came into labor she made sure she had her evening market first. With her husband still asleep she slipped out and went to the cook's wife next door. Between them they managed to stifle her labor cries, and Nuigo agonized for hours there in the back of their shared kitchen so as not to wake their sleeping husbands, and the madam in the main building. It was only after the baby was born that Nafe would be woken from his masculine slumber. Nuigo thanked the Aweri woman who helped deliver her little boy, and the latter said, "We are like sisters on a pilgrimage. Why should we not help one another?" Then she had laughed, and continued, "See, you have given your husband a son. It's not very common for people to have sons for the first baby. You are very lucky." Nuigo smiled weakly. "I know what you mean. Girls are love babies. But, you see, only now with this son am I going to start loving this man. He has made me into a real woman, or I want to be a woman and a mother. So why should I hate him now?" "No reason," replied her friend and helper. "I must wake them up now, to begin the labor pains by drinking palm wine." "Yes, you do that. At home an abuser, when a wife is in labor the husband becomes restless. But these men here sleep through it all," Nuigo observed. Cordelia nodded. "They stopped being men long ago. Now they are machines. But I love Yabani. I was married into his family when I was only 5. His mother brought me up, and I had grown to like and respect him long before he sent for me. I guess that's why I keep having girls. You will have a boy one day, I am sure of it." Call the men to enjoy their triumph. The men duly started celebrating with palm wine and cigarettes from Nuigo's stock, and the celebration went on till dawn. In the morning, the white woman asked the men what the matter was with them, and they told her the good news. The madam promptly brought out a lot of old baby's clothes which she had brought with her from her last visit to England. Nuigo was grateful, for even though they were old they were clean, and so beautiful and soft were they, that she forgot her pride, and accepted them gladly. She forgot that in her culture only slaves accepted worn outfits for a newly born baby. Every child had the right to his own first-hand woven bee cloth to be wrapped in, after he had been washed from the banana leaves. But Nuigo was so tempted by this new softness that she told herself that it did not matter very much. After all, who knew her in Lagos? She was just a mother among so many thousands of others. It did not matter. Nuigo spent all her meager savings the day her baby was named. Nafe bought her a new abarda cloth, the first he had ever bought her with his own money, and they had a piece made up for the baby as well. Everyone ate and drank to their HEARTS degrees content, for people had brought small gifts to help the new parents in entertaining their guests. When Nuigo felt stronger, she went back to her petty trading. As soon as Nafe left in the mornings to go to Dr. Mears' compound, she would wash her baby, put him on her back and rush to catch the early workers on their way to work. They bought many matches and cigarettes from her. Then she would come home to feed her child and lay him down to sleep while she hurried through her housework. In the afternoon her husband came in for lunch, and later she would back her baby again in time for the evening rush of workers. There were beginnings to be changes in their one room. They now had attractive mats on the floor. They had polished wooden chairs and new patterned curtains. And Nuigo no longer had to wait for her only outfit to dry before going out whenever she washed it. Now she had 2 others. She accepted Nafe as the father of her child, and the fact that this child was a son gave her a sense of fulfillment for the first time in exclamation point first. Life. She was now sure, as she bathed her baby son and cooked for her husband, that her old age would be happy, that when she died there would be somebody left behind to refer to her as mother. Then one morning, the morning when this story started, when Nuigo came to put her baby on her back, before going to her stall at the railway yard to sell her wares, she saw him, her baby Ngozi, lying there where she had laid him only a short while before, dead, stone dead. She did not scream. She did not call her husband. She simply left the room, walking gingerly backwards, until she whirled round like a fierce hurricane and ran,